I never imagined that owning a piece of land would turn me into the most hated man in Riverside County, California. But here we are. My name is Clarke, and I'm a 42-year-old software engineer who bought a 5-acre property in the hills outside Temecula 3 years ago because I wanted privacy, space, and the ability to never hear my neighbors' arguments through paper-thin walls again. What I didn't know when I signed those papers was that buried 6 feet under my land ran a natural gas line that fed an entire HOA community called Sunset Ridge Estates, a development of 50 cookie-cutter homes that had been built 15 years after my property's original deed was recorded. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in February when I was drinking coffee on my back porch, watching the sun come up over the hills. A white pickup truck with Sunset Ridge HOA emblazoned on the side came barreling up my long driveway, kicking up dust and gravel. Out stepped a woman in her late 40s with blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, wearing a purple blazer despite the casual setting. She marched toward me with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Excuse me," she called out before she even reached the porch steps. "Are you Clarke?" "That's me," I said, setting down my mug. "Can I help you?" "I'm Regina Patterson, president of the Sunset Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your property maintenance." I looked around at my land. Sure, it wasn't manicured like a golf course, but it was my land. I had native grasses, some oak trees, and a workshop I'd built near the back. Nothing was falling apart or creating an eyesore. "What about it?" I asked. Regina climbed halfway up the steps, uninvited. "Your property is visible from several homes in our community, and frankly, it's bringing down property values. We need you to mow more regularly, remove those unsightly wood piles, and paint that workshop a more neutral color." "That red is absolutely garish." I felt heat rising in my chest. "Madam, I don't live in your HOA. I'm not subject to your rules. Your property borders ours, which means you have a responsibility to maintain standards that don't negatively impact our residents," she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "I have a list here of requirements we expect you to meet within 30 days. She thrust a paper at me. I didn't take it. "Regina, I'm going to say this as politely as I can. I'm not part of your HOA. I don't answer to your HOA, and I'm not changing anything about my property because you don't like how it looks from someone else's backyard." Her face flushed red. "We'll see about that. Our attorney will be in touch." She stomped back to her truck and peeled out, leaving me standing there wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. The letter from their attorney arrived 4 days later. It was full of legal jargon that essentially threatened to sue me for being a nuisance to the HOA community. I called my own lawyer, a guy named Marcus, who'd helped me with the property purchase. "Can they do this?" I asked him over the phone. "They can try," Marcus said, "but they don't have much ground to stand on. Your property predates their development, and you're not part of their association. They'd have to prove significant damage or legitimate nuisance, and not liking your aesthetic choices doesn't qualify. I'd ignore it for now, but keep me posted if they escalate." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from grocery shopping to find an inspector from the county standing in my driveway with Regina. She'd called in a complaint about unpermitted structures on my land, specifically my workshop. The inspector was actually reasonable and checked my permits, which were all in order. He apologized for wasting my time and left, but Regina lingered. "This isn't over," she said. "What is your problem?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why are you so obsessed with my property?" "Because people like you think you can do whatever you want without considering how it affects others. We've built a beautiful community with standards, and you're ruining it." "I was here first," I said slowly, like I was explaining something to a child. "My property deed is from 1998. Your development was built in 2013. You built next to me, not the other way around." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and left without another word. Over the next month, Regina and her HOA board made my life hell. They called in noise complaints when I used power tools in my workshop, even during reasonable daytime hours. They reported me for having excessive vehicles when my brother visited and parked his RV on my property for a weekend. They even tried to claim my oak trees were diseased and posed a fire hazard, which required me to pay for an arborist to come out and certify they were healthy. I was at my breaking point when I discovered something interesting while reviewing my property documents one evening. I'd been going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, looking for anything that might help me understand why the HOA felt so entitled to dictate what I did with my land. That's when I found it buried in the title reports and easement records. The natural gas line that fed the entire Sunset Ridge Estates development ran directly through my property. It had been installed in 2012, a year before the homes were built, and according to the documents, the gas company had paid the previous owner for an easement. But here's the thing about easements. They're not permanent fixtures. This particular easement had been negotiated as a temporary construction easement that was supposed to be renegotiated with any future property owner. The gas company had simply never followed up after I bought the place. I sat back in my chair, staring at the papers. Technically, I had no legal obligation to allow that pipeline to continue operating across my land without proper compensation and a formal easement agreement. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a vindictive person. I don't go looking for fights. But after weeks of harassment, false complaints, and threats from Regina and her HOA board, I was done playing nice. I called Marcus the next morning. I found something, I told him, explaining the easement situation. He was quiet for a long moment. Connor, you need to be very careful here. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, this could get complicated. Can I legally shut off access to that pipeline? Technically, yes, the easement isn't valid anymore, and it crosses your private property. But you'd need to notify the gas company and the affected parties, and I'm telling you right now, this will create a firestorm. They've been creating a firestorm for me for 2 months, I said. Maybe it's time they understood what it feels like. Marcus sighed. If you're serious about this, do it by the book. Certified letters to the gas company, the HOA, and all affected homeowners. Give them proper notice, 30 days minimum, and be prepared for them to fight back hard. I spent the next week drafting letters with Marcus's help. They were professional and straightforward. The existing easement was invalid. I was not granting permission for the continued use of my property for the gas line, and they had 30 days to make alternative arrangements or negotiate a proper easement agreement with appropriate compensation. The compensation I listed was fair, something like $5,000 per year, which was actually below market rate for this type of easement. I sent the letters via certified mail on March 15th. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Regina. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed into the phone. No greeting, no pretense of civility. "I'm exercising my property rights," I said calmly. "You can't cut off our gas. We have 50 families who depend on that line. Then the gas company should have maintained a proper easement, or you can negotiate with me for one. This is extortion. No, Regina, this is how property rights work. You've spent 2 months trying to force me to change my property to suit your preferences. Now you're upset that I'm enforcing my actual legal rights? We're not paying you a single cent," she hissed. "We'll sue you for everything you've got." "Feel free. I'll see you in court." She hung up on me. Within 24 hours, I received a cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney claiming my actions constituted an illegal threat to public utilities. Marcus fired back with a detailed response explaining property law, easement requirements, and my completely legal right to control access to my private land. The gas company called me next. The representative was much more professional than Regina. "Mr. Clarke, we've received your letter regarding the easement. We'd like to negotiate an agreement with you." "I'm open to that," I said. "My terms are in the letter." "We'll need to do a full survey and assessment, but your terms seem reasonable. However, we need more than 30 days to complete this process. Would you be willing to extend the deadline?" "That depends. Are you going to work with me in good faith?" "Absolutely. We want to resolve this properly." "Then yes, I can give you a 60-day extension, but I want it in writing that you're actively working on a formal easement agreement." We came to an understanding. The gas company was actually reasonable about the whole thing. The HOA, on the other hand, went nuclear. Regina organized a protest, I'm not kidding, an actual protest outside my property. About 20 people from Sunset Ridge showed up with signs saying things like, "Don't freeze our families," and "Property rights don't include cruelty." They stayed on the public road, so technically they weren't trespassing, but they shouted at me every time I left my house. One woman yelled, "How can you sleep at night knowing you're hurting innocent people?" I stopped my truck and rolled down the window. "How could you sleep at night filing false complaints and harassing someone for 2 months just because you don't like how their property looks?" That shut her up for a moment, but Regina pushed forward. "This isn't about that. This is about basic human decency." "You should have thought about decency before you started your campaign against me," I said and drove off. The local news picked up the story. A reporter named Jessica Chen called me for an interview. I agreed because I wanted to tell my side of the story. She came out to my property with a cameraman, and I showed her all the documentation, the harassment complaints Regina had filed, the invalid easement, everything. "So you're saying the HOA has been targeting you for months?" Jessica asked. "Yes. I have records of every false complaint, every inspection they've called in, every attempt to force me to change my property when I'm not even part of their association." "And the gas line issue?" "Is completely separate. I discovered the easement problem while reviewing my property documents. The gas company has been using my land without a valid agreement. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm asking for standard market compensation for an easement, and I've given them time to arrange it." The story aired that evening. The coverage was actually pretty balanced, showing both the HOA residents worried about their heating and my perspective on the harassment and property rights. But of course, Regina gave a tearful interview about how I was holding families hostage over money. The next day, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Sarah Blackwood. Wait, I mean Sarah Thompson, a member of the Sunset Ridge HOA board who apparently disagreed with Regina's approach. "Mr. Clarke, can we meet in person? I'd like to talk to you off the record." We met at a coffee shop in Temecula. Sarah was in her mid-50s with graying hair and kind eyes. She looked tired. "I want to apologize," she said as soon as we sat down. "Not all of us support what Regina has been doing. Some of us on the board think she's taken this way too far." "I appreciate that," I said. "Can I ask you something honestly? Is there any way to resolve this without shutting off the gas?" "I'm working with the gas company on a proper easement," I explained. "I've given them 60 days. I have no intention of leaving your community without heat if they handle this correctly." Sarah relaxed a bit. "Regina made it sound like you were demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars. $5,000 a year, which is actually below market rate. That's completely reasonable. The HOA could probably cover that from our budget if the gas company won't." She paused. "The problem is Regina. She's turned this into a personal crusade. She's convinced the community that you're some kind of monster." "What can I do about that?" "Honestly, probably nothing. Regina doesn't back down, ever. She's been HOA president for 6 years, and she runs it like a dictatorship. Most of us just go along because it's not worth the fight." "Maybe it should be worth the fight," I said. Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe you're right." The 60 days I'd given the gas company were productive. They surveyed the line, did all their assessments, and drafted a formal easement agreement. The compensation was fair, the terms were clear, and they even agreed to pay for any property damage that might occur during future maintenance. It was exactly what should have been done from the beginning. But Regina wasn't satisfied. When the gas company presented the agreement to the HOA board for informational purposes, she went ballistic at the board meeting. Sarah called to tell me about it. "She accused the gas company of colluding with you. She wants the HOA to sue you to force you to allow the line without compensation." "On what grounds?" "She's claiming it's a necessity easement, that the community has a right to basic utilities." "That's not how easements work." "We know. Our attorney told her the same thing, but she's not listening." Things escalated further when Regina organized a letter-writing campaign to local politicians, trying to get them to pressure me into backing down. I received angry emails from people I'd never met, calling me greedy and heartless. Someone even started a Facebook group called Stop Connor Clarke, with hundreds of members posting about what a terrible person I was. The problem for Regina was that none of it changed the legal reality. The gas company wanted to settle this properly, and they had the authority to do so. The HOA had no legal standing to prevent them from negotiating with me. Then, Regina made her biggest mistake. It was late April, about a week before the easement agreement was supposed to be finalized. I was in my workshop when I heard machinery on my property. I walked out to find a construction crew digging near the gas line. Regina was standing there supervising. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "We're performing necessary maintenance on the utility line," Regina said with a smug smile. "This is my property. I didn't authorize this." "We don't need your authorization. This is essential infrastructure." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's department. Then I called Marcus. The deputies arrived within 20 minutes. I explained the situation and showed them my property documentation, proving I hadn't authorized any work. The construction crew foreman looked nervous. "Madam," one of the deputies said to Regina, "do you have permission from the property owner to be here?" "I don't need permission. This is HOA business." "That's not how it works. This is private property and you're trespassing." Regina's face went red. "You can't be serious. We're trying to maintain essential services. You need to leave now or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The construction crew packed up immediately. They'd been hired by the HOA and clearly didn't want legal trouble. Regina stood her ground for another minute before finally leaving, but not before shouting, "This isn't over." Marcus called me back an hour later. "Connor, you need to document everything that just happened. Photos, videos, the police report, everything. Regina just gave you a strong case for harassment." "I don't want to sue anyone. I just want to be left alone." "I understand, but you need to protect yourself. This woman is unhinged." He wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, Regina's behavior got worse. She started parking on the public road near my property entrance, just sitting there in her car watching my house. When I'd leave, she'd follow me for a while before turning off. It was creepy and intimidating. I called the non-emergency police line to report the stalking behavior. They sent a deputy out to talk to her, but unless she violated a restraining order or made specific threats, there wasn't much they could do. The easement agreement was finalized on May 1st. The gas company paid me the first year's fee up front, and we signed all the paperwork. The gas line could continue running through my property legally and properly. The whole nightmare was supposed to be over. But Regina had one more card to play. 2 days after the easement was finalized, I woke up to find my property gate had been vandalized. Someone had cut the lock and left the gate hanging open. My workshop door was also pried open, though nothing appeared to be stolen. Instead, someone had spray-painted "thief" across my workbench. I called the sheriff's department immediately. This time, they sent out a detective. Her name was Detective Laura Morrison, and she took the case seriously. "Do you have any security cameras?" she asked. "Not yet, but I'm installing them today." "Do you have any suspects?" I told her about Regina and everything that had happened. Detective Morrison took detailed notes. "I can't make any accusations without evidence, but I'll definitely look into this. In the meantime, get those cameras up and consider a restraining order if the harassment continues." I installed a comprehensive security system that day. Cameras covering every entrance to my property, motion sensors, the works. It felt extreme, but I was done taking chances. The next incident came a week later. I was reviewing security footage from the previous night when I caught something. A white pickup truck with Sunset Ridge HOA on the side, slowly driving past my property at 2 in the morning. It stopped near my mailbox for several minutes before driving away. I called Detective Morrison and sent her the footage. She called me back that afternoon. "Mr. Clarke, I spoke with Regina Patterson. She claims she was checking on a reported disturbance in the area. But given the history here, I've advised her to stay away from your property entirely. If she continues, we can discuss a restraining order." "Thank you, Detective. There's something else. I pulled up the reports from all the complaints she's filed about your property over the past few months. Most of them were clearly frivolous. That's harassment, and it's illegal. I'm going to have a more serious conversation with Ms. Patterson about her behavior." I felt a small sense of relief. Finally, someone in authority was recognizing that Regina had crossed lines. But Regina's response to police attention wasn't to back down. Instead, she called an emergency HOA meeting and proposed that Sunset Ridge Estates sue me for emotional distress caused by my actions regarding the gas line. According to Sarah, who called me after the meeting, the motion actually passed with a narrow majority. I voted against it, Sarah said. So did 3 others. But Regina has enough support from people who only hear her version of events. Let them sue, I said. I was exhausted from all of it, but I wasn't going to be bullied anymore. The lawsuit was filed in early June. It was exactly as frivolous as Marcus predicted. Their attorney was actually someone different from who they'd used before, probably because the previous one had enough sense to decline this case. The new attorney, some recent law school graduate, filed a complaint claiming I had caused severe emotional distress and financial anxiety to HOA members by threatening their access to utilities. Marcus filed a motion to dismiss within a week. His response was devastating. He documented every instance of harassment I'd endured, the invalid easement situation, my reasonable negotiations with the gas company, and the fact that the gas line was never actually shut off. He also included the police reports about the trespassing and vandalism. The judge scheduled a hearing for late July. In the meantime, Regina's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started posting on social media about me, calling me a sociopath, and encouraging people to leave negative reviews on my business website. I'm a freelance software consultant, and my reputation matters. Her actions were starting to affect my livelihood. Marcus suggested we file a countersuit for defamation and harassment. I agreed. At this point, it wasn't about money. It was about stopping Regina from destroying my life because I wouldn't bend to her will. The day of the court hearing arrived. It was a sweltering July morning in Riverside. Marcus and I arrived early and went over our strategy one more time. The HOA's attorney showed up with Regina and 2 other board members. Regina looked smugly confident, like she was certain she'd win. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided over the hearing. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense. After both sides presented their arguments, she sat back in her chair and shook her head. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Judge Hendricks said. "The plaintiff HOA is suing Mr. Clarke for emotional distress because he enforced his property rights regarding an invalid easement." "Your Honor, Mr. Clarke threatened to cut off essential utilities to 50 families," the HOA's attorney said. "Did he actually cut off the utilities?" the judge asked. "Well, no, but the threat itself caused distress. And Mr. Clarke's attorney has provided documentation showing that Mr. Clarke was subjected to months of harassment by the HOA president, including false complaints to county officials, trespassing, and vandalism. Is that correct?" "Your Honor, those are separate issues," the attorney tried. "They're not separate at all. They're directly relevant to this case." Judge Hendricks looked at Regina. "Ms. Patterson, did you file multiple complaints about Mr. Clarke's property with county officials?" Regina stood. "Yes, Your Honor. His property is a nuisance." "And were any of those complaints substantiated?" Regina hesitated. "The inspectors didn't always agree with our assessment." "In other words, no." "Did you also enter Mr. Clarke's property without permission to conduct construction?" "That was for essential maintenance." "On private property without permission, that's called trespassing, Ms. Patterson." The judge looked at both attorneys. "I'm dismissing this lawsuit with prejudice. The HOA has no standing to sue for emotional distress when they were the aggressors in this situation. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning the HOA for filing a frivolous lawsuit. You'll pay Mr. Clarke's attorney fees." The HOA's attorney looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Regina's face went white, then red. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. That man tried to freeze out our entire community." "No, Ms. Patterson, he enforced his legal property rights after being harassed by you, and I'm not finished. Mr. Clarke's countersuit for defamation and harassment will proceed. I suggest you get a better attorney for that one." We left the courthouse victorious, but I knew this wasn't really over. Regina wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. I was right. 3 days after the hearing, I received a letter from a law firm representing Regina personally. She was suing me as an individual for defamation, claiming I had damaged her reputation by making false accusations of harassment. Marcus laughed when I showed him the letter. "She's digging her own grave. Everything we've said about her is documented fact. This is just going to make things worse for her." But the lawsuits meant more time, more stress, and more money spent on legal fees. I was winning, but it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. That's when things took an unexpected turn. I received a call from a woman named Denise Martinez, who lived in Sunset Ridge. "Mr. Clarke, you don't know me, but I'm part of a group of homeowners who are trying to recall Regina from the HOA board. Would you be willing to provide testimony about her behavior?" Testimony? For our recall petition. We need to show cause for why she should be removed. Her harassment of you is part of a larger pattern. She's been bullying residents for years, filing violations for minor infractions, and generally making everyone miserable. What do you need from me? Just a written statement about what she's done to you. And maybe to attend one of our meetings to explain the situation to other homeowners. A lot of people only know Regina's version of events. I agreed. The following week, I attended a meeting at Denise's home with about 15 Sunset Ridge residents. I brought copies of all the documentation, the complaints Regina had filed, the police reports, the court judgment, everything. As I explained my side of the story, I watched people's faces change. Many of them had clearly believed Regina's narrative that I was some kind of villain trying to extort their community. When they saw the actual evidence of what had happened, the mood shifted. "I had no idea she'd been doing all this," one man said. "She told us you were demanding $50,000 to allow the gas line." $5,000 per year, which is standard for this type of easement," I corrected, "and I negotiated directly with the gas company. The HOA was never going to pay anything." "She lied to us," a woman said, sounding shocked. "She's been lying to everyone," Denise said. "About Connor, about HOA finances, about a lot of things. That's why we need to remove her from the board." The recall effort gained momentum. Within 2 weeks, they had signatures from over 60% of the HOA members. Regina tried to fight it, claiming the recall was invalid on technical grounds, but the HOA's bylaws were clear. A vote was scheduled for mid-September. In the meantime, my countersuit against Regina proceeded. Discovery revealed some interesting things. Regina had been using HOA funds to pay for her personal legal fees without board approval. She'd also been selectively enforcing violations, targeting people she didn't like while ignoring infractions by her friends. The deeper our attorney dug, the more misconduct we found. Sarah called me one evening in late August. "Connor, there's something you need to know. Regina has been embezzling from the HOA." "What?" "We hired a forensic accountant to review the books for the recall proceedings. She's been moving money into accounts she controls, claiming it's for legal expenses or emergency repairs that never happened. We're talking about over $40,000 over 3 years. That's fraud." "Yes, it is. We're reporting it to the police tomorrow." The next day, Detective Morrison called me. "Mr. Clarke, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're opening a criminal investigation into Regina Patterson for embezzlement and fraud. Given her history with you, I wanted you to know in case she tries to retaliate." "Thank you, Detective." "Also, we analyzed the vandalism on your property from May. We found fingerprints on the spray paint can that was discarded near your workshop. They match Regina Patterson's prints from when she was fingerprinted during her real estate license application years ago." "She did it herself?" "Looks that way. We'll be arresting her on vandalism and trespassing charges as well. Just wanted you to be aware." I sat down, processing this information. Regina had actually committed crimes against me, and now she was going to face consequences. The arrest happened 2 days later. I wasn't there, but Sarah called me with the details. Deputies had shown up at Regina's home in the morning with a warrant. She'd been charged with embezzlement, fraud, vandalism, and criminal trespassing. She was released on bail that evening, but the damage to her reputation in Sunset Ridge was complete. The recall vote happened as scheduled in September. Regina was removed from the HOA board by an overwhelming majority. Denise was elected as the new president, and the board voted to drop Regina's personal lawsuit against me and to cooperate with my countersuit. "We want to settle this," Denise told me over the phone. "The HOA will issue a public apology, pay your legal fees, and make a commitment to never harass you again. In exchange, would you drop the countersuit?" "What about Regina personally?" "She's facing criminal charges. That's separate. But the HOA as an entity wants to make this right." I discussed it with Marcus. "It's a good offer," he said. "You've won. Taking it further won't accomplish much except more time and stress. I agreed to the settlement. The HOA issued a formal apology that was sent to every member and posted on their website. They paid all my legal fees, which totaled almost $30,000. And they enacted new policies about how complaints against non-HOA properties would be handled, basically ensuring this could never happen again. Regina's criminal case proceeded through the fall. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney wasn't interested in going easy on her. The embezzlement alone was a felony, and combined with the vandalism and her pattern of harassment, they wanted to send a message. The trial was in November. I was called as a witness to testify about the vandalism and the harassment campaign. Sitting in that witness box, looking at Regina in her defendant's chair, I felt no satisfaction. Just sadness that someone had been so consumed by the need to control others that she'd destroyed her own life. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Regina was sentenced in December. She received 3 years in prison for the embezzlement and fraud, plus additional time for the vandalism and criminal trespassing. The judge was particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks. Ms. Patterson, you held a position of trust within your community and you abused it repeatedly. You stole from your neighbors, you harassed an innocent man for months, and you showed no remorse for any of it. You need to understand that being in a position of authority does not give you the right to target people who disagree with you. I attended the sentencing because I wanted closure. When it was over, I walked out of that courthouse feeling like I could finally breathe. Life slowly returned to normal. The gas easement was properly in place and the gas company paid me annually like clockwork. My relationship with Sunset Ridge actually improved. Denise and the new board were respectful of my property rights, and I occasionally attended their community events when invited. No more complaints, no more harassment, no more drama. I ran into Sarah at a grocery store in January, about a year after this whole thing started. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Better, much better. You?" The HOA is actually functioning like a normal HOA now. We make decisions democratically, we don't harass people, and we're actually building community instead of tearing it down. It's amazing what happens when you remove a toxic person from power. Lessons learned? Too many to count, she said with a smile, but the biggest one is that property rights matter and so does basic human decency. Regina forgot both. I think about this whole experience sometimes. I never wanted to be the bad guy. I never wanted to shut off anyone's gas or take anyone to court. I just wanted to live quietly on my property without being harassed. But Regina forced my hand at every turn, escalating when she should have backed down, lying when she should have been honest, and ultimately committing crimes when she should have just accepted that she didn't control the entire world. The irony is that if she'd just left me alone from the beginning, none of this would have happened. I would never have reviewed my property documents closely enough to find the easement issue. The gas company would have continued operating without a formal agreement, and Regina would still be HOA president, probably making other people's lives miserable but not facing criminal charges. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about that in prison, whether she's realized that her own actions led directly to her downfall, whether she's learned anything from it. But mostly, I just enjoy my coffee on the back porch in the mornings, watching the sun come up over the hills, grateful that I can do so in peace. The natural gas line runs quietly beneath my property, properly documented and compensated, serving those 50 homes in Sunset Ridge Estates. Everyone gets heat, I get fair compensation, and life goes on. That's all I ever wanted. Just to be left alone to live my life on my own property without someone trying to force their will on me. Property rights exist for a reason. Easements exist for a reason. And laws against harassment, embezzlement, and vandalism exist for a reason too. Regina learned all of those lessons the hard way. I just wish she hadn't had to drag me, an entire HOA community, and the legal system through hell before she figured it out. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I'll see people from Sunset Ridge out walking their dogs past my property. They wave now. Some even stop to chat. It's funny how removing one toxic person can change an entire community's dynamic. The people were never the problem. The homes were never the problem. It was one person with too much power and too little accountability, Denise transformed that HOA into what it should have been all along, a community organization focused on maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, not an authoritarian regime looking for violations and enemies. Under her leadership, they repainted the community center, organized monthly social gatherings, and actually built the kind of community that makes a neighborhood feel like home. And me? I'm still just the guy on the hill with the 5 acres, the red workshop, and the oak trees. I eventually did clean up the wood piles, not because anyone forced me to, but because I wanted to. I mow a bit more regularly now, too, not for the HOA, but because I take pride in my property. The whole experience taught me something valuable about standing up for yourself. For months, I tried to be reasonable and avoid conflict. I explained politely that I wasn't part of the HOA. I ignored Regina's initial complaints. I tried to de-escalate. But none of that worked because Regina wasn't interested in being reasonable. She was interested in power and control. It wasn't until I stood my ground, enforced my rights, and refused to back down that things changed. Sometimes being nice isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight back, document everything, and let the legal system do its job. It's exhausting and expensive and time-consuming, but it's worth it to protect yourself from people who think they can bully their way through life. Marcus still calls me occasionally to check in. We've become friends through all of this. He told me he uses my case as an example when teaching younger attorneys about property rights and easements. Apparently, it's a perfect illustration of why proper documentation matters and why property owners need to review their deeds carefully. The gas company also learned something from this situation. They've since gone back and reviewed all their easements in the region, reaching out proactively to property owners to formalize agreements that had been left informal for too long. They even sent me a thank you note for bringing the issue to their attention before it became a problem with other landowners. As for the Sunset Ridge community, they're doing well. Property values actually went up after Regina's removal, probably because buyers felt more confident purchasing in an HOA that wasn't run by someone facing criminal charges. The community has a reputation now for being well-managed and reasonable, which is exactly what an HOA should be. I still have the security cameras up. Not because I expect trouble, but because I never want to be in a position again where I can't prove what happened on my property. The footage has come in handy a few times for completely benign reasons, like when a delivery driver claimed they dropped off a package that I never received. The cameras showed they'd gone to the wrong address. See? Not everything is dramatic. Life is good now, quiet, peaceful, exactly what I moved out here for in the first place. I work on my software projects in the workshop. I take walks around my property in the evenings, and I never have to worry about someone leaving passive-aggressive notes about my grass being too long or my trees being the wrong kind of aesthetic. The natural gas flows, the homes stay warm. Everyone goes about their lives, and I learned that sometimes the most dramatic thing you can do is simply enforce your rights and refuse to be bullied. The rest takes care of itself. One unexpected benefit of all this is that I've become something of a local resource for people dealing with HOA issues. I've had at least a dozen people reach out to me over the past year asking for advice about dealing with overreaching HOAs. I always tell them the same thing: document everything. Know your rights. Don't be afraid to lawyer up if necessary. And remember that HOAs only have the power you give them. Some of those conversations led to other people standing up to their HOAs. I heard about one guy in Murrieta who successfully fought back against an HOA that was trying to force him to remove his vegetable garden. Another woman in Menifee won a case against an HOA that was trying to charge her thousands in fees for violations that weren't actually in their bylaws. It's amazing what happens when people realize they don't have to just accept whatever an HOA demands. I'm not anti-HOA, by the way. I understand why they exist and why they can be beneficial when run properly, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, handling shared expenses for things like pools or playgrounds. These are all legitimate functions. The problem is when HOAs and their leadership forget that they're community servants, not feudal lords. Regina forgot that. Or maybe she never knew it. Either way, her time in prison is hopefully giving her opportunity to reflect on how she treated people. I don't wish her ill. I actually hope she comes out of this experience a better person. But I also have no sympathy for the consequences she's facing. She made choices, bad choices, and those choices had consequences. The civil settlement from the HOA paid for a nice addition to my workshop. I built out a proper office space where I can work on my consulting projects with a view of the hills. I also donated some of the money to a legal aid organization that helps homeowners fight back against HOA overreach. It felt like the right thing to do, turning my negative experience into something that could help others. My brother visited last month and we sat on the porch drinking beer, watching the sunset. He'd followed the whole saga from afar, getting updates from me throughout the ordeal. "You know what's crazy?" he said. "All of this could have been avoided if that woman had just minded her own business." "Yep," I said. "Like, literally every single thing that happened to her, she brought on herself." "That's usually how it works," I said. "People create their own problems and then act shocked when there are consequences." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd just given in to her demands at the beginning?" I considered that. I'd probably be miserable, constantly worried about the next complaint or demand. She would have seen me as weak and kept pushing, and I'd be living on my own property feeling like I didn't have control over it. So no, I don't think giving in would have made anything better. Good for you for fighting back, man. Seriously. We clinked our beer bottles together and watched the sun dip below the hills. It was a perfect moment, the kind you can only fully appreciate after you've fought for your peace. Looking back on everything, I realized that the gas line was never really the issue. It was just the catalyst. The real issue was about respect, boundaries, and the rule of law. Regina didn't respect my boundaries, so I enforced them. She didn't respect the law, so the law caught up with her. And ultimately, her community didn't respect her leadership style, so they removed her. The system worked, even though it took way too long and was way too stressful. But it worked. Justice prevailed. The good guys won. And maybe that sounds cheesy or naive, but it's true. Sometimes standing up for yourself and doing the right thing actually does lead to the right outcome. I still have the original letter from Regina's attorney, the one threatening to sue me for being a nuisance. I keep it in a drawer as a reminder of where all this started. Every once in a while, I'll pull it out and read it, just to remember how far things went and how close I came to just giving in and letting her win. But I didn't give in. I stood my ground, and that's made all the difference. The natural gas line runs beneath my property, properly documented, properly compensated, properly maintained. 50 homes stay warm in the winter. The HOA functions like a normal HOA should. And I live my life in peace on my 5 acres with my red workshop and my oak trees. That's the end of the story. No dramatic showdown, no revenge plot, no elaborate scheme. Just one guy who refused to be bullied, used the legal system properly, and came out the other side intact. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. I learned that property rights matter, that documentation is crucial, that standing up to bullies is necessary, that the legal system, while slow and expensive, does eventually work, and that peace and quiet are worth fighting for. These days, when I wake up and make my coffee and walk out onto that back porch to watch the sunrise, I appreciate it more than I used to, because I know what it's like when that peace is threatened. I know what it's like to be harassed and targeted and made to feel unwelcome on your own land. And I know what it takes to fight back and reclaim that peace. The gas flows, the homes stay warm, and I drink my coffee in peace, knowing that I own this land, I control this land, and nobody can take that away from me just because they don't like how I choose to live. That's the real victory. Not the court cases won or the money received or even seeing Regina face justice. The real victory is sitting here on this porch, on this land, in this moment, completely at peace. And that's worth more than anything Regina and her HOA could have ever taken from me.